is because this. Hi, my friend's coming Lime, and does the Bible teach that homosexuality is wrong? This question is especially important when it comes to the lives of LGBT plus people, because one of the main reasons that LGBT plus people are suffering today is because this is being used as a weapon against them, and it's used so aggressively that it even affects the lives of non-Christian LGBT plus people through political decisions or by affecting the attitudes of the people around them. And one simple thing that we can all do about this is to just know the arguments for the interpretation of the Bible that affirms love. The more we know, the better, and that is why I made this series, a series about pulling Christian homo-negative arguments up by the root. We're going to analyze every passage in the Bible that people use to try to argue against homosexuality, and we're going to look at exactly why I and so many Christians believes that the homo-friendly interpretation makes more sense. So hopefully this video provides you with new knowledge or at least new perspectives that you haven't thought about before. I am of course going to take the biblical scriptures seriously. You might still ask yourself though, what can a non-Christian like Lime teach anyone about Christianity? Well, not much. Actually, at least not by myself. So, luckily, we have someone who really knows what he is talking about to help us. Jesper Svartvik is a professor of theology of religions at Lund University and at the Swedish Theological Institute in Jerusalem, and he has written a book about how the Bible has been wrongfully interpreted by people to allow slavery to be anti-Semitic, to be against homosexuality. So we will have his expert perspective and my outside perspective. So I'm on my way home from Professor Svartvik, and I've learned so much. So let's start debunking homophobia. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start with the story about Adam and Eve. Now, a common argument against homosexuality is that God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And the claim is that since God, in the beginning, created a heterosexual man and a heterosexual woman, then that means that God intends mankind to be straight. And therefore, if you're not straight, then that means there's something wrong. And many go as far as saying that you should go to therapy to change your sexual orientation. In other words, go to therapy to fit in the metaphorical box that God originally intended for people. But if we continue this logic that what God created in the beginning is also exactly what He intends things to be in the future as well, then we must remember that God created Adam and Eve in a certain skin color, body type. He had them speak a certain language. He created Adam and Eve to work in a garden. Are all variations from these things also sins? Is it a sin to have another job? Is it a sin to speak another language? Should people be coloring their hair? I do not believe that is the case. And therefore, we must recognize that God is open to variations from what He originally created, rendering this Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve argument useless. What is with these arguments that things can only have one purpose and one functionality? I've even heard people say that oral sex is wrong because the mouth is only for eating, and they say that using their mouths. Now, about changing your sexuality to fit in this metaphorical box, Svartvik has an excellent comment to that.
And it's interesting to see, going back to the still in the book of Genesis, but chapter 18-19, about Sodom and Gomorrah, that in early rabbinic interpretations of that text, they use the Greek myth of Procrustes, whose name means to pull out, to make something longer than it is. And they say that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they were like Procrustes, that he invited people, he had a home next to a road, he invited people to stay, he offered them a nice dinner, and then he offered them to stay in a bedroom, and the idea was that the bed fits everyone exactly. But what they didn't know was that if they were too tall, he cut their legs off. If they were too short, he prolonged their legs. And that's why he's called Procrustes, because it means, as I said, to prolong something. So it's interesting, it's very interesting to see that some of the rabbis, some of the early readers of this text understood that the problem with the people in Sodom, that sodomy, so to speak, consists in treating people in only one way, conceiving of people being in only one way when they are in the bedroom. It's only one way to fit the bed, and that is to cut something off or to prolong it. I find that very, very interesting, that is the early reception history of Sodom and Gomorrah.
And that is a very interesting, when you put that in the perspective of trying to make someone straight.
Yes.
That is kind of like cutting someone's legs off or prolonging someone. That is a very interesting thing. And also, there is another approach to this. When talking to Svartvik about this Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve argument, then he brought up another interesting perspective to this discussion.
Well, first of all, we have to remember, this is a text in book called Bereshit in Hebrew and Genesis in English. So it is about the beginning. Formative texts that have meant so much to millions of Jews and Christians, thinking about what does it mean to be a human being, and that is in Hebrew Adam. So his name is not only a name like yours or mine, but it's also a symbol of, he incarnates what it means to a human being, being created alone in one way, lonesome, and also being created together with other people. So it's a lonely man of faith, but also a human being in a society. And that's why we have two creation stories, and one going in one direction and the other one in the other direction. It's also narratives, stories, fascinating stories about what life is all about. And life in Hebrew is Chava. So when their names are Adam and Eve, as we say in English, it's not just names, it's also symbols and signs that this is the beginning of a reflection, what it means to be a human being and what life is all about. And that means that for me, it's a very odd theology to say they were called Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve, because they are filled with so much meaning, even the names.
So, if this isn't necessarily about two people specifically, but rather early humanity, then there probably were variations among these people already. Different people given different gifts and different purposes, possibly including different sexualities. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there. There is more to the story. For example, there's a part in the Bible where Jesus, according to some, says that the reason that God created man and woman is so that man will marry woman. And I'll get into that in the next episode. Let me here just leave you with the thought that from what I've seen so far, it's definitely possible that God intends a certain degree of diversity, and interpreting the Bible in that way makes us so much more loving and affirming to each other, which hints to me that is the right path. What, should we be affirming everything now? What you talking about, Will?
Then what about
the children? No, it doesn't mean that we should be affirming everything. It means that we should be affirming love. It means that we should be affirming grown people expressing their love for each other. In Romans 13:10, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So hopefully this video inspired you in, well, one way or another. If you, however, already knew all of the arguments in this episode or in this whole series, then great. Then you can share them with others so that they get to know them too, and you can inspire me and all the other people here by sharing your best arguments. That is the point of this series. I share my best arguments and then I want to hear yours. This is us working together, inspiring each other. I want this to be a give and take where we all contribute to the pool of ideas that brings us closer to a more accepting world. So this is the end of this episode, but it is the beginning of this series. So if you liked this video, then click that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the future episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.